Should be recording.
All right, welcome everybody. This is the KubeVirt community meeting. Today is the 19th of September. And so without further ado, jumping into it, the first agenda item is the CI tests stabilization that Peter Kotis has been working or spearheading.
So far so good. The progress is steadily progressing. We've been able to work with CI team to stabilize their part. They figured out with our help that they have a bug in the Dockerd daemon, so they are working on it to fix it. From our part, I'm now finishing the stabilization of my alt test that will serve as a template for everybody else to write tests. Once this is finished and merged, I will write a proposal email for everybody else to fix their fix their tests, so they follow the guidelines. That's most of it.
Awesome, thank you. And next up, the IO threads work. Just wanted to go over some changes that have been recent. We switched to a policy-based approach a couple weeks ago. This week, the big change was that we were now using automatic instead of dedicated, because we found that asking for dedicated disks automatically would tend to ask for too many IO threads if you had a large number of disks and a small number of CPUs. So instead, we used a more reasonable approach where it's sort of a quasi-shared, basically round robins the IO threads and creates a pool of reasonable number of threads based on how many CPUs you have. If you ask for a dedicated disk, that still works, but it's something that you do with malice aforethought for a specific disk. And one more thing on that, just a quick change to the CPU count. I used the wrong setting at one point and somewhere in the code, so I need to fix that. And otherwise, I think that PR is going to be good. So that should definitely hit this week. And next up, Marcin, would you like to talk about the secret and config map disks work?
Actually,
Okay, moving on. Hold on.
Yeah, one note, and sorry, I've got some background noise, but one note that what I think is with the work on templates, we might see if no, never mind. Let's forget about it. Please carry on.
Okay. So a few words from me about secret and config map disks. So the feature is merged, implementation. So we are able to use config map and secrets now. But there is one thing. I created a bug in Kubernetes about open API validation, and this is Stu. Let me edit. This is the bug. There is a description of what's wrong with CRD validation, and because of that we cannot use keys projection in config map and secrets, but besides that it works, and we can use config map and secrets as a volume type. So that's all, I guess. If anybody has some questions, then ask.
All right, well, if there's no questions or comments, then we'll move on to Vert Control VNC. Mark.
Yes, that was a really interesting issue. So the problem was when we run Qbert on OpenShift Cryo, then VertCTL VNC did not work, and the remote viewer just showed waiting for display 1. To understand what's going on, the traffic flow is the remote viewer connects to VertCTL. VertCTL connects via WebSocket to Vert API server. Vert API server does kubectl exec to the Vert launcher pod. That one has a socket, and the socket is connected to the QEMU process. So that is the traffic flow. It's already a bit complicated. So, and after checking the traffic, I figured out that we suddenly saw, instead of only a line feed at the end of a network frame, we saw carriage return plus line feed. I did not find out why this only happened with cryo, but the reason was that in the exec command between Vert API server and Vert launcher, we use the -E and T flags, which is for an interactive TTY. And the default behavior of TTY is exactly this, changing the line ending. So I solved this by removing this flag for VNC, but keeping it for VertCTL console because there we have a TTY. I need it. And yeah, well, then it worked.
Awesome, thank you. Any questions or comments on that? All right, Peter Horacek.
I do have a question, sorry.
Okay, go on.
Sorry to be late. I don't remember, why did we switch from the socket approach to from VNC TCP port? It's like for the old folks using KubeVirt.
So the quick answer is for API server validation. I believe that when we were using just a bare socket, we couldn't impose any sort of RBAC rules on that at the Kubernetes level because it was just exposed. And so by proxying that through the API server and then using a remote exec, and it lets us use the basic Kubernetes permissions model for our sub resources that we didn't have before. Does that answer the question?
Yes, thank you.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Go on.
Yeah, another point was back then also that for direct VNC access, we would need to have an IP on the pod, and that couldn't be done back then because of the networking. But I think Stu's argument is the more justifying reason.
Also a good point. Thank you. And so without further ado, Peter, if you'd like to talk about Multus.
Sure. Just a short update. We resolved a bug in OVS CNI that with MAC addresses that prevented startup of VM in like 2% of tries, and it's merged. It is merged and new image is built with this fix. And we also added a manifest to OVS CNI repository that will deploy OVS CNI and Multus on OpenShift in a really easy way. Just apply the manifest and it should be ready to be used. And that's it.
Cool. Any questions? All right, Fabian, boilerplate to run CI on Travis.
Yes, so this is a smallish heads up. So we had a couple of projects which we need to test if they continue to work. Like we've got the KubeVirt demo, which is based on Minikube, and which we also try to run on Minishift or OC cluster up. And we didn't test it so far. So the problem was that we had a README and with a guide describing how it would work on OpenShift, but in the end that did not work. So what I've been working on is to allow us running Minikube, OC cluster up, and Minishift on Travis in order to test the flows we are describing in the user guide. Now, because I use it in the KubeVirt demo and because I used it in a different repository for common templates, I factored out the boilerplate to set up Minishift or OC cluster up or Minikube on Travis. And actually now it's like 4 lines of code to get Minishift or OC cluster up or Minikube up and running on Travis within like 2 minutes. So that is very charming because that means any other project can just use these 4 lines to then test their stuff on Travis. Like for example, CDI could use that approach to test CDI on Travis. Yeah, and I hope to use that in other projects as well. It's no complete replacement, by the way, for standard CI, which we are also using, but it's good enough for a lot of things, I think, especially because it's so fast. Running a Minishift test is like 3 to 4 minutes, and running an OpenShift test is like taking 7 minutes, which is effectively up to launching a VM and getting it booted.
Nice, great job. Any questions, anybody? Comments? Next topic is web UI designs. I don't know who added that. Was that Richard?
No, not me.
Okay.
Yeah, it was me. It was me. I hope there was some owner for that, but I don't see anybody, so let's stroke it out.
Roger that. Now, next up we have Kareem, KubeVirt trial on Amazon Web Services, and is that Google Cloud Platform active on KubeVirt.io?
Yeah, Kareem and I would like to announce that the Qbert push button trials on AWS and GCP are now available on our website, Qbert.io. For those who aren't familiar with the term push button trial, what we've basically done is pre-built images on AWS and GCP that pre-installs upstream Kubernetes and Qbert on a cloud instance that a user starts up. So this is to help users quickly bring up an environment to try out Qbert without having to think about how to install it and the different flavors that we have of going about installing environment. Also, with help from Ari's CI team, mostly Joe Stewart, we also have CI in place to build and test and publish our images. So that's really helpful. And then with help from Adam from the UX team, we developed a couple of pages on the website, one for AWS and one for GCP, describing to users how to use the push button trials. And at the end, we also have pointers to a couple of labs that the users can go through to sort of play around with Qbert and the CDI. And that's it.
That is awesome. All right, if nobody has any questions on that, are there any other items for the agenda? Anything to bring up to the open floor?
Nothing from me. I'm good.
I would have one question, and I'm wondering how, because I had one problem, and I would like to build Kubernetes 1.12 and run this. So how do we build these Kubernetes images which are running on the CI? Do we have some template pattern or something like this? Because I see in Kubernetes repo there is some scripts like make image, and I was wondering how do we provide our Kubernetes images in repo KubeVirt CI?
I can answer that. The build process is pretty much manual at this stage, and what we do is we do not build the Kubernetes. We use the upstream distribution. You call make, and it will download and install existing Kubernetes. We do not build anything.
Yeah, but when you are doing just make, you are using some specific image provided in our registry. That right now we have Kubernetes 1.4 and 1.11, and I was wondering how we provide these images which we have in KubeVirt CI on Docker Hub. If anybody knows that.
Yeah, they are pre-built. Roman Morris is doing that because he's currently the only one who can do that. He basically built them manually and exposed them in the Docker Hub, and then you can download them.
Okay, so I will ask Roman for more details.
Yeah, actually, I think you can reach out. Maybe Mark already knows some stuff, but I also know that Vladik also did this in the past, and I think Artyom as well, but Artyom is out.
Okay, because I can do this manually as well. I mean, build just Kubernetes image, but I thought maybe we'll have some automated way and I wouldn't have to just deal with these things. But I will ask as you said. Thanks.
Yeah, well, just to clarify, the reason we can't just automatically consume a new Kubernetes or OpenShift version arbitrarily is, like was hinted at just a second ago, we do need an upstream Docker image built, but also sometimes rules change and things break. And so we need to actually test and ensure that it actually works before we can deploy KubeVirt on it. So that's kind of the holdup with adding new providers.
Okay, cool. Thank you for the answer.
All right, any other questions? Well, that sounds like that brings us to the end. Thanks, everybody, for attending. See you next week.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.